Good afternoon and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio online lunchtime talk. These are live every Friday at 1 p.m, beaming out live onto your smartphones, laptops, iPads and living room televisions. My name's Luke and I am the Pervasive Media Studio producer. These talks are our chance to throw open the digital doors of the Pervasive Media Studio and for you to hear more from the people who are part of our community or who are working on things that excite us. An especially big welcome to those of you out there who are new to the studio, for whom this may be the first time you're engaging with what we do. For all those newcomers, here's a little bit about what it is we do. The studio is a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, with everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We're a partnership between Watershed, University of West England and University of Bristol, and we're a home for early stage ideas and companies and a meeting place of both creative and commercial industries. We are a studio space. We offer desk space, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all for free to our residents. And ultimately, we're a safe place for artists and companies to take risks at early stages in their development and practice and make time for collaboration. Today's speaker is one of our residents, and Tim is the research lead for Supersum, a wicked problems agency he founded with Tom Rowlands in 2019. In this talk, Dr. Timothy Senior will introduce the Wicked Problems Agency Supersum, which is an experiment in wickedness, clumsiness and messiness. Through Supersum's projects on rural innovation, dementia care and community resilience to COVID-19, this talk will explore the real-world implications of running a wicked problems agency. There is a Q&A at the end, as there is every week, with the talk running at roughly 35 minutes. If you want to ask us any questions, just pop them into the chat window here. Or if you like, you can also ping us a message on Twitter. We're at PM Studio UK. Whichever you like, just throw your questions and feedback as we go. I'll pick them up and ask them to him at the end in the Q&A. A captioned and recorded version of the talk will be available here after the talk is finished. Next week's talk is by studio resident and performer Tom Marshman and historian Jeannie Sinclair, and they will touch on research methods, embodiment of characters, ethics, and how creative tech led to the making of a theatre show called A Haunted Existence. You can get news on all our future talks by following us on @PM Studio UK on Twitter or Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or subscribing to our newsletter on our website, which goes out monthly. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel whilst you're sat there listening to me talk, and give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Please do share the link now if you have one of your social media channels open. We can share it live and you will be able to share it with other people in your networks. If you have your own talk that you might want to do, hang on till the end and I'll talk to you about how you can get involved in these lunchtime talks. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Timothy Senior.
Hi everyone, and thank you to the PM Studio for the opportunity to give this talk. Next slide, please. So this lunchtime, I'm going to take you on a bit of a roller coaster ride to the world of wicked problems, clumsy solutions, and messy institutions. I'll talk a little about each in turn, and then in the second half, I'll move on to Supersum, a wicked problems agency I founded with Tom Rowlands in late summer 2019. Next slide, please. Okay, so the world is complex, but there are many problems that are actually quite tame in nature, even if they look very complicated. And all of the different disciplines and sectors and industries and professions we have and so on, they've each developed and in many cases perfected their own way of dealing with that type of problem. So if you're wanting to build an offshore wind farm, you would turn to a specialist structural engineer, specialist project managers and so on. But there are other types of problems, particularly linked with societal issues, that are very different in nature. They aren't tame in the same way, and these are called wicked problems. Rittel and Weber in the 70s did a lot to define the characteristics of these wicked problems in their field in relation to urban planning and its effects on different communities, shareholders and stakeholders. And they defined 10 key characteristics which are understood as holding true to this day. And I'll summarize these sort of into four key points here. The first is that they are really hard to define. Right? You can define wicked problems in different ways, and depending on your explanation, different types of solution will present themselves. So there is a direct relationship between how you define the problem and how you devise a solution. It's got to be done together at the same time. The way you tackle one sets the way you tackle the other. Second key sort of property is that there's no clear solution. And this has the effect that solutions to wicked problems really can only be judged as good or bad, more or less appropriate, more or less good, but never right or wrong in a scientific sense. And different people will come to different conclusions about whether an intervention has been successful or not. And their conclusions really then must be used to better understand the problem and ask if there are different routes to a solution. Third property is that there's no stopping rule. Wicked problems rarely go away because the solutions people come up with change the nature of the initial problem. So even good solutions at a given time may become less effective over time and need to be renewed. And if done really well, a good solution may even be able to lay the grounds for that renewal itself. And the last is that tackling wicked problems is not a game. There's no real world trial run for this, right? There's no simulation of what you might intend to do that can bypass actually working with people. So each attempt at a solution will have implications. Basically, wicked problems affect real people's lives in real ways. And any response to those problems must be handled with care. So let's look at a real world solution, a real world wicked problem. The solution is not so easy. Let's think about climate change. And here I'm drawing from the work of Marco Fevey and Michael Thompson in the book Clumsy Solutions for a Complex World. These references will be made available later for anyone who wants to follow it up. So let's look at three different policy positions which we are by now all familiar with, right? So in one perspective, climate change and global warming are caused by excessive consumption and production, right? We recklessly waste resources and are putting life on Earth in imminent danger. And in this perspective, the solution, the type of solution which is often raised focuses on a need to recognize the shared and intrinsic value of life, right? They point to a key role for groups and individuals to hold businesses to account, hold governments to account in whatever way, and force them to change their behavior as they're the cause of the problem, or seen as the cause of the problem. In a second version, climate change is caused by a lack of global planning. And in fact, the world isn't in imminent danger, and there's time left, ample time left, to plan a gradual shift towards new technologies and energy resources that do not emit greenhouse gases. And here the kind of accompanying solution focuses on an increase in global governance, right? With the aim of reining in and steering global markets in order to protect the global commons. The third, which to many of us is unpalatable, is that climate change is exaggerated. You know, it's a myth pushed by idealists who fantasize about a better shared world, or it's an agenda pushed by bureaucrats who want, you know, bigger budgets and bigger influence. And in that worldview, you often see that it's up to entrepreneurial individuals and businesses within a free market to do whatever it takes when and if climate change becomes a problem for them. Now, historically, all of these have made claim to use reason, logic, and even science to argue their points, right? Each casts a suitable solution based on that particular worldview and that perceived ability to influence that world. They're not reducible to each other, they can't substitute each other, and it's unlikely that a proponent of one is going to agree with a proponent of another. And certainly in the case of the first two, it would be hard to prove or falsify in a scientific sense which one's better. Now, the third, climate denial, still has incredible sway. So it has to be something that you acknowledge. But it also reminds us that wicked problems are historically contingent. They're bound to people in place and time. So our discussion about the nature of this particular wicked problem and how convincing different explanations are and how plausible different solutions are was different 10 years ago. It was different 20 years ago. It was very different 30 years ago. And the debate is not going to look like it is now in 10 years' time. That we can be sure of. So at any time, wicked problems are hard to define. There's no clear solution. There's no stopping rule. And it's not a game. Next slide, please. Now, because wicked problems are about the things we do, right? And the way we make decisions and the way we behave and the way we perceive the behaviors of others, it can be helpful to turn to the social sciences for tools that might shed light on on what's going on in the world around us. So here I'm going to briefly talk about one approach in particular. This is the theory of socio-cultural viability, or cultural theory for short. And it's a field that stems from the work of the late Dame Mary Douglas. The question here is whether there might be a limited number of fundamental social building blocks from which emerges the enormous, endless diversity of social and cultural life that we see around us every day. And the proposition that has emerged is that there are 4 fundamental social building blocks. They're in constant tension with each other, and they're active in every conceivable social domain, whether you're talking about a family unit or a global corporation. And that these building blocks relate to the way we organize, perceive, justify, and act on social relations. Now, if we're thinking about wicked problems and how to respond to them, cultural theory then offers us a great way into understanding the nature of the problem and how solutions might work. The whole idea builds on 2 dimensions of sociality. Grid, which concerns itself with how roles differentiate people and then to determine their actions, and group, which concerns itself with how a commitment to togetherness binds people together and how that determines their actions. So high group means high levels of interaction with other people, with individuals making a strong commitment to others in the way they behave. Low group at the other end means that people are negotiating their way through life by themselves, right? They're picking and choosing who they want to associate with when and if they want. Grid, high grid, emerges when roles are distributed according to social classifications, right? That might be your professional training, your educational level, but also gender, race, and age. Low grid at the other end emerges when those roles are assigned according to personal ability, right? The opportunity to compete fairly, to prove yourself, or through regulation that ensures equal access. So what the proposition is that the richness of social life in all of its glory emerges in the way that these 2 dimensions, grid, so the degree to which we're separated out, and group, the degree to which we're brought together, how they interact. So you see here the 2 axes, grid and group, plus for high, minus for low. Next slide, please. So what emerges then in the four quadrants here of this interaction between grid and group are the 4 fundamental building blocks of social life, right? You have the hierarchist in the top right, high grid, high group. Everyone has their place, but we're all in this together. You have the egalitarian position, high group, low grid, bottom right. We're all in this together and we're all equal. You have the individualist, low grid, low group, bottom left. I'm in this alone and I don't care what you do. And you have the fatalist, low group, high grid, top left. I'm in this alone and I can't escape from the place that society puts me in. Now, these 4 building blocks that emerge each capture a specific way of looking at the world around us, right? And they each tie into associated beliefs and different values and emotions and perceptions and interests and so on. Now, they don't exist in a pure state, right? They occur in every conceivable social domain. All 4 occur in every conceivable social domain and in interaction. And it's in that interaction that this small number of building blocks then gives rise to that enormous social and cultural diversity. So let's briefly look back at that climate change example. So the 3 policies we talked about match onto those 4 building blocks in different ways, right? We saw in the first one, we saw an egalitarian response to an over-dominant, overbearing, hierarchically enforced set of inequalities in society, right? The second one is the opposite, right? It's the need to strengthen a hierarchical response to tackle a failure of global planning. And that failure is caused by unchecked individualism. The third one, climate denial, we see that there's the entrepreneurial individual doubling down on business as usual, ignoring the advice of experts and indifferent to our shared needs. And I think we can all see how fatalism, one way in which fatalism plays into this, right? We've all sensed perhaps how that sense of helplessness in face of a dominant policy position on climate change that we disagree with. We just don't know what to do with. We don't know how to tackle it. So when we think about wicked problems, right, cultural theory, it's not offering a sort of prescriptive answer, right? It's not a box ticking exercise. It's giving us a tool and to look at a given situation and identify whether there are particular interactions and tensions present based on those building blocks. Because at the end of the day, if you want to drive new solutions to a particular wicked problem, right, those are the interactions and tensions you're going to have to deal with, right? So you need to be sort of tuned into what's going on around you. And that's what the tool provides. Next slide, please. So if there's no simple solution to wicked problems, then what do you do? What do you need to do? Cultural theory argues that wicked problems can only be addressed effectively through responses that dynamically combine those four fundamental building blocks. And these are called clumsy solutions. It's not because they're unreliable or unstable, it's because they take into account the perspectives and rationales outside of business as usual. So to exclude any one of those building blocks is to set up a solution that will fail because it will ignore key ways in which people who might be very different from yourself experience and understand the world. So to paraphrase Barry Schwartz, each way of life undermines itself, right? Hierarchies are stagnant without the creative energy of individualism, uncohesive without the binding force of equality, and unstable without the passivity and acquiescence of fatalism. So that leads us to the question: how do you generate clumsy solutions? And here again, I'm going to refer to the work of Marco Fevey and Steve Ney, references at the end. If your commitment is to dynamically combine these four building blocks of social life to form a solution, then in most cases, not every case, but in most cases, you're going to need some sort of collaborative process between different people from different organizations with different views of life, right? In order to bring those interactions to life. Now, there are endless ways in which we can bring people together around shared challenges, right? We have, a well-established design thinking model. We have participatory action research. We have competitive innovation voucher schemes. We have knowledge transfer partnerships. We have living labs. We have consensus conferences. We have town hall meetings. The list is endless, but they're not all clumsy. And through that lens of grid group, you can look at any of those given methods and you can ask, does this dynamically combine those four social building blocks? So let's imagine, right? You're setting up a collaborative process. What are the kind of questions you're going to ask? You're going to ask who should contribute to a solution finding process, right? Where should we meet to do this work? How are we going to divide up tasks? What role should technology play? What information should we use? And so on and so on. And each of these social building blocks will have a different response. So if you look at the question, who should contribute, right? Should it only be those individuals who want to? Should it be everyone who is affected? Should it only be those who fit within a hierarchy of experts and mediators and professionals? Or should you pick people randomly, throw caution to the wind? Those would be the four very different suggestions of those four ways of seeing social relations. So in developing a clumsy solution, you're trying to bring something of those four perspectives together, or at least considering the balance between them. So the grid group lens really focuses your attention, right, on who is being involved in this process and why, in very real terms. And if your response to a wicked problem, not any problem, but a wicked problem, is to consult only experts, right, or endlessly seek group consensus in all decision-making, then the solution you develop may not respond in the end effectively to that problem. And although it may perfectly satisfy the needs of your organization, it's a solution, it won't be a clumsy solution. Next slide, please. So the final piece of this puzzle then is who is fit to implement clumsy solutions? Now, I only want to touch upon this issue briefly, but there is a case to be made that the demands of clumsy solutions mean that not every organization is necessarily fit for purpose, right? So in a simplistic way, an organization that is extremely hierarchically organized or riddled with endemic fatalism is going to struggle to bring a clumsy solution to life. So it's a messy institution you want. And that again considers how those 4 fundamental social building blocks can be brought into a dynamic interaction in a way that can allow clumsy solutions to be generated in response to wicked problems. So it has implications for the way you structure your organization, the way an organization is led, the way roles are assigned or taken on, the way you make decisions and who gets to be involved, right? Now, as an aside, some of you may have come across the organizational theorist Frederic Laloux and his work on teal organizations, right? So it's basically a design for organizations interested in coping with a complex world, right? Now there's a lot to say about the overlap between cultural theory, green group, and evolutionary teal. And maybe if that's something people are interested in, we can look at that a bit during the question and answer, but there's a lot of overlap there. Next slide, please. So because this thinking about wicked problems and clumsy solutions and messy institutions is at the end of the day about people and what people do together, it escapes very quickly from lofty theorizing to become something that's very real and practical. And supersum, this is a not-for-profit wicked problems agency I set up with Tom Rowlands in late summer 2019, just in time for the global pandemic. Hooray. And it's our real world experiment in wickedness, clumsiness, and messiness. Next slide, please. That's Tom there on the right. So Tom is supersum producer. He's worked nationally and internationally in production and management roles, across arts and culture, design, health, and tech sectors. He's held production roles at Fact Liverpool. He's been program manager at Future Everything, amongst others. Myself, I'm supersum researcher, and my interest has always been in how conventional responses to a complex, messy world can be opened up to new perspectives. And over the years, my research has spanned medieval European urbanism, social neuroscience, design of dementia-friendly communities. It's about breadth in many ways. Now, I don't want to slavishly sort of break this down in terms of grid group, but this is broadly how we see supersum as a messy institution. So me and Tom, we act as the sort of administrative research and production core, and we work to bring shape, consistency, and direction to what supersum does. And as a small core team, we can work very quickly, right? And pretty efficiently in writing and signing contracts, in making payments, and so on. So that structure helps us just get on with stuff, you know? Our specific focus is wicked problems. And we think there are many characteristics common to clumsy solutions and wicked problems that mean there's a benefit to looking at a breadth of wicked problems. So we work around issues in related to community and environment and health, and there are many overlaps there and possibilities for cross-fertilization that we hope in time will only deepen our ability to tackle wicked problems. And in terms of the work we do, we help diagnose wicked problems, we carry out research activities, we lead on our own projects, we work with others to put project teams together. Excuse me, we're very flexible in that way. And I think perhaps our most sort of important aspect is the people we work with. So we're a tiny team, but we have a very porous boundary. So for any project we bring together or help put together, the best team that we can for the job, wherever they come from. It doesn't matter what discipline, what sector, what profession. It's about finding the right people with the right interest, skills, and understanding. And the people we develop a good working relationship with become supersum associates, which means that we help them devise and lead on their own projects through supersum, as long as it fits the the values of the organization. So in that way, supersum becomes, with each iteration, with each project, something slightly different. And it's not in a way that me and Tom dictate. It's coming to define its own culture. And already within 3 or 4 months, we've seen how that shifts. And finally, we're a not-for-profit. We're a company limited by guarantee, and that's really important to us, right? This is in recognition of different types of value at play. People get paid for their work, but everything else will be invested into supersum, which is people. Whether that's building a culture of working together in new ways, supporting project R&D, travel and accommodation costs to initiate projects and so on. And also helps us to sort of reach out to people around Wicked Problems who might not otherwise be involved in that work or not have the opportunity to be involved. That's our ambition. Next slide, please. So in that sense, we are always looking for new projects and project partners. So whether you're a creative producer, artist, activist, community engagement officer, academic researcher, if this sounds like it's something interesting to you, please get in touch. So we have a number of projects underway. We're working with the Churches Conservation Trust on issues around healthy aging and social connectedness in rural communities. We're working with the UK Dementia Meeting Centres on clumsy solutions to adult social care embedded within communities. We're working with the Natural History Museum in Berlin on connecting climate change research, city policy, and local activism. And we have a number of projects submitted for around community resilience, misinformation, and COVID-19, which I actually won't talk about today, but perhaps in the Q&A if someone is interested, because we all want to talk about COVID-19, yeah. So in the time left, I'm just going to look at two projects that we managed to get underway before lockdown. So the first is Let's Gather In. Now, our interest here is in what makes thriving rural communities today. So rural areas in the UK have really changed unbelievably over the last 60 years. They've shifted from a farming dominated industry to one that's much more economically and socially and culturally diverse. And it's interesting to note that actually there are more registered businesses per head in rural areas than urban areas by quite a margin. Now, we've all heard reports of the impact of loss of local services, increased social isolation, and many of this actually reflects persistent drivers of disadvantage in rural areas. Now, from the perspective of Wicked Problems, right, there's a set of interactions between public policy and local government, between community-focused local initiatives, between individual-led grassroots activism. And we have to recognize a degree of fatalism as well in how people look to the future of rural communities. I'm from a small Somerset village, so these are issues which are close to my heart. So what we see then is interactions between those, which you could pick apart in terms of our fundamental social building blocks, and those interactions in many places are creating haphazard, patchy, and almost random responses to real world problems. Next slide, please. So in the, yes, next slide. Sorry, thank you, perfect. So in the broadest possible sense, a clumsy solution might ask, how can communities be supported in identifying their own shared needs, right? How can individuals be empowered to lead on new responses? And how can that shared insight be meaningfully scaled in some way to help others learn from it and adapt it, iterate it, take it on board? So we approached the Churches Conservation Trust to explore this further. They care for 340 plus churches in England that are no longer in use by parishes. And they have the ambition of developing them in terms of their full social, cultural, spiritual, but also economic potential. They have a nearly 2,000 strong volunteer network, with many of those individuals serving as community leaders and working in their own way to shape community life. And this is an aim that's really now shared very strongly by the Church of England as a whole, who are trying to rethink how they can bring a different kind of life to their 16,000 parishes across the UK. So the broad clumsy solution we are sort of aiming towards is to ask how in the long term CCT sites can be across the portfolio, right, can be used as community hubs as and when they're needed, and using temporary architectures to ready them for bursts of collaborative work that don't put the heritage status in risk. That's a very long way to get there, though, right? These are not neutral spaces. They can be seen as religious sites that are exclusionary to some. They can be seen as, as heritage sites too precious to interfere with. They can be seen as historic sites so disconnected from the world today that they can't possibly serve a purpose. Now, we argue that actually it is their exceptional, out of the ordinary nature that matters most in having a transformative effect on the collaborative experience. These are not neon strip-lit, white painted basements in universities, right? That's an unfair characterization, but yeah, you know what I mean. And the history of enacting community in crisis is much more nuanced and long-standing, than is widely known. They're very well suited to this role, but it's a case we have to make. So our first step is then working with a small number of communities in North Somerset to get to know people, to understand how they perceive these sites, to explore with them some of these challenges associated with rural life today. And we're doing this in part through traditional social science methods, but we're also using a Bristol grant from the University of Bristol to try something new. So working with the Jigs audio system from Xander Wilson at Open Lab in Newcastle, we're developing a new type of interactive audio device that we can place in CCT sites, so people can record their own stories and thoughts in place at a time of their own choosing, right? So this is about helping people get involved in conversations around placemaking and place change through a variety of different routes that best suit them. And finally, we're asking how that long history and that long reach of communities back to the medieval period can help us rethink rural innovation today. These are sites that have always faced uncertainty, right? They've always been active in rural and economic life, and they've always had to adapt to changes in society. In a way, little has changed, but we've sort of lost sight of that, perhaps. So the team includes CCT community officers, that's Ed McGregor, Helen Booker, CCT community volunteers. We have social sciences research from the University of the West of England, that's Dr. Stuart McLean, medievalists from Bristol University, that's Professor Marion Ailes and Lauren Cole. We have digital civics research from Open Lab in Newcastle, that's Dr. Xander Wilson and Dr. Simon Bowen. UX design from our own Tom Metcalf at the PM Studio, and supersum draws the whole thing together. Next slide, please. So the second project I want to talk about is very different in nature. This is in the moment. So it's work we were commissioned to do with Studio Meineck, who are also based in the PM Studio, run by Chloe Meineck. Our interest here lies in the evaluation of projects that involve participation of people with a dementia, with a focus on arts and creative activities. Now, judging value as part of any evaluation means determining the merit, worth, or significance of something. But value to whom? Health innovation today is a multi-sector, it's a multidisciplinary effort. And the evidence needs of businesses, of innovation funders, of health research institutions, of care managers, of family members, of people themselves with dementia, by no means align. So a focus on whether arts interventions do or do not work, rather than whether they're right or good for that person, has become a stumbling block in thinking about value. Evaluation might be a process of, excuse me, of uncovering certain truths, but it can also be complicit in generating those truths, right? Embedding, for example, forms of discrimination around age-related ability, rather than just evidencing them. Now, most approaches to evaluation focus on generating evidence that only satisfies a narrow set of organizational needs. Fine. But this is often done in a way that unwittingly alienates those being evaluated, right? And arrests participation in it. It diminishes the likelihood of getting involved in other forms of value engagement, and it can entrench models of evaluation that run against the reality today of a complex health field, right? The health field today is sustained by different sector partners, not in spite of them. And we do need a shift in the way we think about that in terms of evaluation. Next slide, please. So at broadest possible resolution, a clumsy solution then might ask, what are the ways in which we can balance an authoritative position on evaluation, right, with the strength of a co-produced value base and the insight generated through individual reporting? So we were approached by Studio Meinecke with this kind of evaluation challenge in late 2019. Now, their product is Music Memory Box, and it offers a new approach to helping people with dementia become engaged in the moment. It's called, a focus on an interaction with an arts engagement that's uplifting and moving in the moment. Now, through the radio frequency tagged objects, individual objects can be paired with a sound file so that the device creates this sort of multi-sensory trigger around objects, around sound, around music, that people can link to reminiscence work about people, about places, about objects. So it creates an incredibly individual experience, and as a result, it's really hard to measure that effect. Now, we think that in comparison to much of what else is going on in the arts, health and dementia field, Chloe has developed a remarkably clumsy solution of her own in the best possible sense. So it's been a real joy working with her. So our part of this, it's principally Studio Meinecke, myself and now Dr. Karen Gray, as of yesterday, who is a specialist in the methodological challenges of arts and health evaluation. So what we've been doing is we've gone through initial reports on how Music Memory Box has been used. We've looked at the different types of benefits and challenges people have experienced in using the box. We've looked at the context in which those experiences have occurred, and we've tried to make sense of how people's reporting of those experiences reveal the different assumptions and values and expectations they've brought to using the Music Memory Box. So from here, we've gone on to develop, we think, a simple, but we hope convincing model of how Music Memory Box creates that positive in the moment experience, based on real world experiences. So rather than focusing on a sort of nebulous concept of well-being, we've identified what matters to people, right? It's changes in sensory and tactile engagement with the world around them through the objects, through the audio. It's how the box helps them re-engage with past experiences or engage in other types of memory recall, right? It's how the box helps them make known personal preferences and dispositions to others. And it's how it affects their social activity, right? Their ability and interest to engage with others. Now, in reporting on these experiences, we've opted to build in multiple evaluation routes that reflect different types of dementia experience. So someone can choose which route is most meaningful to them and their own lived experience. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, we're going against the grain by not treating evaluation as this sort of free-floating add-on at the end of an arts experience, which always requires shifts in mental state. It requires an engagement in a very different type of language, sector devised language. So instead, we've worked to fully integrate box use and box evaluation into one experiential process. So the way you learn about the box, the way you use and tailor the box to your own needs, the way you adapt the box as your dementia experiences changes, and the way you report on those experiences along the way. So rather than treating evaluation as a process designed exclusively by experts and applied to situations almost independent of what the situation is, our clumsy solution folds in evaluation as part of the experience itself. It draws on expert knowledge, collective insight, individual reporting, and it takes into, we think, careful consideration on what those barriers are to reporting experiences that have historically stopped people from engaging in that kind of evaluation activity. Next slide, please. So to end, just to say, our new website is up, supersum.works, where you can find out more about what we're doing, the wonderful people who make Supersum possible, and to get in touch. Next slide, please. So we would love to hear from you about the wicked problems you face, ideas for new projects and partnerships, as well as funding opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, I've done like 10 of these talks, and that's only the second time I've left myself.
Not bad.
Tim, thank you very much. That was great, and I finally think I understand what a wicked problem and a clumsy solution is. So that's ace. Normally, there's a small period of pause while we wait for the questions to pop into the chat, but there are loads, so I'm going to get stuck straight in. Melissa Blackburn asks, what has it been like setting up a new business given the current crisis?
Well, before I talk about that, I just want to thank Melissa Blackburn, who came up with the idea of the plus, that is the supersum logo. And it's only a couple of days ago I realized that the logo becomes the grid group, which becomes, when rotated, the interaction. So Melissa, we owe you a lot. So it's a great question. Now, you might think that is COVID-19 a wicked problem? This is really complicated, and this is something we will be unpicking for a long time to come, right? You could argue that any government that didn't immediately clamp down and put people into lockdown conditions would have been utterly unacceptable. And if that's the solution, then it's not a wicked problem. Initially, it becomes a wicked problem later on as people get frustrated with lockdown and so on and so on. But that's another issue. Now, you might think then that as it becomes a wicked problem, it's perfect for a clumsy solution approach. So supersum should be booming. We should be, run off our feet. But the thing about wicked problems, the thing about clumsy solutions is they take time and they take a bit of money and they take effort, and you have to be ready for them. Now, a lot of the people we've been working with, everyone's been thrown into crisis. So partners, we're working with who are struggling to deliver core activities. We've seen the funding in the third sector crash to the floor. So it's actually been a very difficult time in that sense to think about clumsy solutions. So what we've done instead is we've gone back to all of our projects got canned at the beginning, just to make that clear. So we've gone back to all of our partners and we said, well, actually, let's learn from COVID, right? Let's see how this helps us understand what community resilience looks like, what it means for an organization to go into panic mode instead of clumsy solution mode. So that has then resulted in a load of new bids, which are now in, to try to look at those issues. But again, perhaps this is part of the clumsy solution approach. Those projects are not looking at reacting to the current situation. All of those projects are saying, when this lifts, it may come back again. All those projects that learn from COVID-19 also have to future-proof us in other ways. So yeah, it's been a challenge. And of course, all this work is based on face-to-face working together. And that's been really, really difficult. And I'm not a Zoom person.
Well, you're doing pretty well so far for someone who's not a Zoom person, Tim. This might be a tricky question to follow up on, but All Dancing asks, how do you make decisions about the work you do take, like what you prioritize in the short, medium, and long term, and balancing your kind of income opportunity and focus on your ongoing inquiry? I mean, that is 3 questions in one go.
So I guess we are trying to approach this in a messy institution way, right? Some opportunities just come up out of the blue, and there's a fatalist side of that. You just have to be open to what happens and then make that decision. Is this worth pursuing? Our sort of trajectory is to say, if we can work with a partner where we can do on the ground work in place, right, with people, but that partner then allows us in the long run to scale that work in some way. So if we can develop some exciting work at particular sites owned by the, run by the Social Conservation Trust, because they're a national charity, then actually we can take that further. With the dementia meeting centres, we're working with one in particular, but through that national network, there's the opportunity to take the best of what we've done and take that further. That's our core priority. But when other opportunities emerge for smaller projects, for trial work, for basic consultancy work or simple research activities, then we will sort of take them on their merit and see how the whole portfolio at a given time looks. But already within those, 5-6 months we've been working, that has shifted and that has moved. And COVID-19 again, right? It's changed everything. But our hope is that as a messy institution that isn't dependent on just me and Tom, we're just that bit in the middle. All the work depends on everyone else who comes and joins us. But that allows us to reorient quite quickly. I don't know whether this is going to work. So we knew we will see. Talk to me in a year's time. But yeah, flexible, agile, messy. That's what we're trying to be. Yeah.
Well, we'll have you back in a year's time to let us know.
Right.
Andrew asks, to what extent are you able to engage in conversations with individuals or organisations about community building in rural areas? And does what you engage in have to be funded project work?
So, Clumsy solutions only come about when you're working with people you trust and people who trust you, right? This is why we're not a think tank and we're not a consultants. And working with communities who are not your own, I mean, this is the hardest thing in the world, and you just have to be just incredibly aware that you are someone coming in from the outside, and it may simply be that you have no place to be there, right? So in some of the places we're working, I have gone and knocked on every single door, and I've had a conversation with half the population of some villages in the rain, just because I want to meet people and I want to talk to people. And we're trying different things. That interactive audio device we're developing with the Churches Conservation Trust, that has come about in part due to the successes and failures of our attempt at working with communities, right? You can try surveys, you can try snowball sampling, you can try all sorts of different social science techniques. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. But no, I mean, certainly if our position was we don't work unless we get paid, this wouldn't happen. None of this would happen. But the people we're working with, we're extremely fond of them, and there is no reason why, if the work we're doing now doesn't work out, that isn't a relationship which will go on for years and years and years and years. So there's a long game in this, and that also then influences some of the little things that you have to do just to try to stay afloat and pay your rent every month. It's not easy, but it's very exciting.
So another question then, they say they comment with kicking off with really interesting mention of evaluation of musical memory boxes in dementia. How can you access the gains or the limits in use by people with dementia? So part of the amazing thing about the music memory box is there's a lot of arts. There are two vehemently opposed schools of thought within arts, health, and dementia. There's one school which is very much about arts therapy. So it's art as intervention, right? You as a specialist deliver an arts program in a way that should deliver very particular benefits and gains, right? And then there's a very different person-centric model of arts and health, which basically says the person themselves is the creative one, with a big C, with a small c, whatever you want. And music memory box does a fantastic job of helping people find the sounds and the memories and the objects which really matter to them. And because dementia is this strange beast, there's not one type of dementia. We might not even be sure how many types of dementia there are, and they have very different effects. Some affect memory, some don't really affect memory, some are more sort of spatial visual disorders. Everyone's journey through that will be different. So part of our analysis was to work out what are the very different ways in which music memory box helps people. For some, it's all about just listening to music and it's about tactile objects. For others, it's just about being with other people and chatting away. For others who might be earlier on in their dementia journey, it's about unleashing that
that fullness of what a person who has just been diagnosed with this condition is. They might still, have a job. They may still be very active in their communities. So by trying to look at those different strands, to the reporting, people are able to report on what mattered to them, but the whole language and structure of that evaluation stream fits that sort of route. So it simplifies it, but rather than like an attempt at a one-fit-all, magic bullet evaluation scheme. Yeah, I hope that answers.
That's great, thank you. Next question, when do you consider a project finished?
There is no end. I'll be employed forever, yay. Yeah, that's so there's no stopping rule, right? And part of the reason a big reason for setting up supersum was a degree of frustration I'd had in other institutions around how you take projects on. There is a project-based culture active in many different sectors. Once you're done, you move on. And the value you build through that work is complex and nuanced and multifaceted. And if you can't keep working with that, then you're, to some degree, maybe you're wasting your time. And a lot of us feel this frustration in the various industries, we're in. So it might be that certain streams of work may sort of come to like a natural resting point and be taken up again later. Others may just not work out and you have to abandon them. If we actually are able to generate genuinely clumsy solutions, right? It is a high watermark. I think maybe that's what you're getting at, right? This is not just something, you just get together and then you make a clumsy solution. It's very different from that. But the journey along the way is as important, and that can involve traditional, disciplinary research here and relationship building there and other pieces. So yeah, I guess we will see down the line, whether we generate something which we feel is a genuinely clumsy solution. I think with Music Memory Box, actually we're close with that, but now we have to start testing that with people living with a dementia and see and tweak the design of that guide and there's many stages to that, and that also depends on getting funding for it. So there are always other limiting factors that determine just how clumsy your solution actually will be.
I think you might have answered the following question before I got the chance to ask it, but connected to that one, Julia was asking, how do you devise the framing for a project? Like, what is in and what's out?
So there are these 10 definitions of what a wicked problem looks like, and actually that's very much it's a conversation-based approach. It's looking at different types of literature published on a particular subject. It's identifying whether there are different policy positions that behind them reveal a fundamental difference in worldview. The thing about wicked problems is, however you define it, there's always another problem behind it, and another problem behind that, and another problem behind that. It's not this problem. It's actually a community problem, but actually it's a societal problem. It's actually, so it takes time to sort of work through, and if you can actually get a sense that those 10 characteristics are essentially present, then yes, it's probably a wicked problem. But and in that process, you will also reveal the different kind of trajectories for a clumsy solution which you might pursue. But then in the work you do, other things then emerge. But yeah, and perhaps there's an interesting point here, right? Cultural theory reveals fundamental social building blocks, right? So you would expect many other theories from the social sciences and from other disciplines to overlap with it, right? If cultural theory had come up with fundamental building blocks that no one else talks about, then it wouldn't be a very good theory. So the question is, how can these different theories help us diagnose wicked problems and find clumsy solutions. And they're not all equal, right? Someone who's a post-structuralist is not going to approach this in the same way as someone who's who's swayed by rational choice theory. And even something like evolutionary teal, it's a very different perspective on that, right? It's a first-person account of the world. So the whole thing is based on the things we see and how we understand them. Whereas cultural theory is very much tries to draw on fundamental biological, cultural, and social forces at play. So its ability to give you tools to analyze and understand are very different. And supersum has been about 10 years in the making, and I've tried all sorts of different models of how you deal with, how you cope with complexity. And for me, this feels like one it's really tangible, right? You know, you can really sort of get your teeth into it, and it's not prescriptive. There's no magic bullet here, so it gives you that freedom to keep digging and explore. And I think that there is great value to that approach.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to squeeze one last question in, and we've got about 5 minutes left. Okay. So I'm going to challenge you to try and answer this one in less than 5 minutes. Tanya says, I feel like fatalism is a pervasive attitude, but as you say, fatalists must be involved in creating collaborative solutions. How do you engage them, and how do you move them away from apathy?
Yeah, I mean, so probably the biggest challenge in the wicked problem space is endemic fatalism, and there are no answers to this. You know, I've spoken with people in communities where they have been extremely rude about the work we're doing, and you know, it was clear that there was a very strong sense that this was an absolute waste of time. And then the door gets slammed in your face. What do you do? So I think part of the approach, and certainly the one we're trying with CCT, is you know, not everyone wants someone coming to their door. You know, mention the C word, church, a lot of people get upset. So if you're able to produce lots of different ways in which people can get involved in a way that suits them, then I think you lower that boundary substantially to getting people who might not otherwise be involved. And that's one step. But and this is something I haven't talked about, but it's one of the loveliest ideas in cultural theory. There's the hermit. So there's a big case to be made for the hermit. So the hermit detaches him or herself from society, and in this model, in that separation, he or she is able to imagine what being a fatalist would be like, or imagine what being a dominating hierarchist would be like. So it's not actually that clumsy solutions can only be developed by having different people and organizations representing every one of those views, which was something I alluded to before. In most cases, yes, but there is actually a case that you can, as an individual with an experience of different approaches and different perspectives, simulate different roles, and use that to influence the way you come up with a clumsy solution. Was that within 5 minutes?
Almost perfect. Thank you, Tim. So that's all we've got time for. I want to thank you all for tuning in on this blisteringly hot day across the UK and many other countries that people are tuning in from as well. Tim, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking time to talk to us today. If you want to come and see another one of these talks, next week's talk is called Queering the Archive, and it is by studio resident and performer Tom Marshman and historian Jeannie Sinclair, and they will touch on research methods, embodiment of characters, ethics, and how creative tech led to the making of a theatre show called A Haunted Existence. You can get news on all our future talks by following us on @PMStudio UK on Twitter, or Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or subscribing to our newsletter on our website, which goes out once a month. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel before you leave today, and give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Please share the link with anyone you think might be interested. It will be available to watch again here. And if you have an idea for your own lunchtime talk, If there's a burning issue you'd like to talk about or a new project that you're launching, drop us a line and let us know what you want to chat about. We're always open to hearing from people. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you all again next week.